Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This live broadcast is of grave importance because of the economic collapse that is now imminent globally. Because of the importance of this subject matter, get into the habit of sharing videos like this with your friends and families. Because the last time this happened in 2008, there was a mass media blackout. And that mass media blackout did not prepare the general public as to what is going to be happening. So because of the YouTube and because we now have more control than ever to be able to reach the general public, and so do you, it is up to you to do your family and friends a favor by sharing this link. As of last week, the credit agencies that are responsible for giving your credit scores began to reduce people's credit scores. Say, let's imagine that we are dealing with a credit score of 600. They've been reduced to 400, 300 without you actually knowing. What that means, your ability to be able to access the debt-based economy, the fiat currency-based economy, which you have so habitually become used to, is no longer to be there. And in addition to that, the loans and the mortgages that were being handed out. And I know that you people have been living on your credit card. Well, those things have now just become highly limited. Because of this, your everyday expenses, like you was paying rent and mortgages and everyday food supply with your credit cards, are going to become extremely difficult because the upper limits on your credit cards have been reduced, essentially taking away your ability to even remain in some sort of debt-based economy. And because the entire world system as you know it is in the debt-based system, and you have become habituatized, if that is a word, into this system, I don't want you to be taken by surprise. So do prepare yourself for this so-called credit crunch. It is actually a global depression, the likes of which we have not seen in several generations, if not ever. And it is global, and I'll be giving you some solutions and how to deal with this. And I must emphasize once again, you must share this video. To do so will mean that you are disabling people. And just as I am trying to give you guys as much power as possible for this brand new economy that you are about to enter into, that is going to be debt-free. What does the credit crunch really mean? What does the credit crunch really mean? In everyday language, everyday human beings walking about have been using so much of their credit cards and their loan facilities to be able to just simply pay their way through life. In other words, the work that they do, albeit in this period, the work that they were unable to do was subsidized by their own credit cards. That element of it is now gone. And for those people that took out loans to support their businesses and etc., are finding it that the loans have been withdrawn. It is now imminent that the mortgage companies will start to say, pay back our mortgage. We're recalling it. The loan companies, the credit card companies. Why? Because the banks or the banksters are doing their very best to be able to prop up what is essentially their failing economy, their failing system of debt-based, which they have now successfully projected onto you. That is why when the companies ask for a bailout, what they're essentially doing is saying, can you bill the general public, whether that be the United Kingdom, the United States, all over Europe. Bail us out on behalf of the general public. In other words, they're asking you to pay for it. And the courts at the beginning of August will begin to start opening. And they will be calling you in under those fictitious names, under those fictitious language. Fictitious language means language that has no real meaning. It is in poetry. And the names that they call you in under. And that's why they call it an undertaking, as in a person that deals with dead people. They too are fictitiously conveyed. For my students that know how to deal with these things, they are very well prepared to head this off directly in front of their face, because they don't want to get headbutted by this once again after 12 years of an economic crisis. The looming debt and mortgage crisis is going to increase at an exponential rate. And the courts are going to be busy doing it. My court systems can overthrow all that kind of nonsense. Because as you know, they are calling you in by anything other than what you are, which is a man or a woman. Since the governments and since the corporations get their power or their force through the court systems, the court systems are now active, trying to bring you guys in to get the money out of you to support and buy them an extra half a year, an extra month of breathing space while their entire system begins to collapse. That's what the credit crunch on this era is going to mean. What does it mean on a global scale? Since most things are done in credit to bring goods in, to bring goods out, well, that service is going to be in challenging moments. The food stocks, they will have challenges, but rest assured, there are other powers on this planet that have made sure that you guys are not going to be left starving. The US is the most vulnerable out of the nations because they're not part of the BRIC corporation, which is the gold-backed nations, Brazil, Russia, India, and China. And the US and Europe are going to be very vulnerable to this crunch. What is a debt-based economy? A debt-based economy essentially means anybody that is not using debt, in other words, money that they don't have, to pay themselves through life, is heavily penalized for having savings, is heavily penalized for having large amounts of capital or capitals in their personal banks. As if to say it was engineered to begin with, so you are forced into debt. And because you are forced into debt, you are forever playing servitude to the banks and the banksters. That's the consequence of what a debt-based economy means. It means that you are using money that is not yours, that have been fraudulently conveyed to you, that have been taken from you via the treasuries and then fractional banked because the banks never told you that you or they are the middleman and you're supposed to be the beneficiary, and thereby putting you in a position of debt and making themselves wealthy through your own treasury accounts. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the banks are nothing more than middlemen acting to go and get money on your behalf from the treasury. This is where the real bank is, the treasury. Hopefully, I have made it very clear what a debt-based economy is and what debt is and what the treasury is. the direct as well as the indirect consequences of this is that the crime rate will start to go up. People will feel vulnerable. I want to rest assured you are not as vulnerable as you think you are. Begin to learn to ask questions from your mortgage companies. Begin to learn to ask questions from your credit companies. And you can find the educational material on that, on my website. And then when you've learned to ask questions, learn to use that almighty of them all, which is the pen. Do not take to the streets and riot and cause mayhem and havoc. That is the world of the dead. That is the fiction world. That is the world of the reactionaries. Learn to use the pen, ladies and gentlemen. Learn to use the pen and you will forge your way through this period. And you do not need to be in servitude and you do not need to be in debt. What is being engineered before your eyes is not just the bankers, but for those people that have been educated, know that there is a large player now that is in place. And that player wants the toxic world, the toxic banking, the immoralities of the banking system, the immorality of burning fossil fuels and poisoning the earth, that type of economy where they break and keep breaking things and then charge you what is called a bill and charge you to clean it up, you the general public. Remember democide. Democide is a word denoting that the biggest killer on this planet is your own government. Once you've understood this word of democide, you will understand that your governments are not working for you. As a result, take this opportunity to begin to forge your own demands and let your companies and let your governments be the service providers. And that can all be done with the use of a pen. That is all it takes for you folks to come together and agree upon one thing. Once you can agree upon something, you can agree upon two things. Once you can agree upon two things, you can agree upon an entire constitution. The power remains within you. Do not go reactionary. The toxic world revolves around certain elements. One of them is burning fossil fuel, which will be coming to an end. The players, let's call them, for the better word, a titan. Let's call them titans. The names of which I will be releasing later on, but not today, later on. Just as I release the names of your gods, which are known as the Olympians, and their bank accounts, and so on and so forth, which you can find on my website. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, your gods that people have been worshipping are nothing more than men and women with bank accounts. That toxic economy, like the petroleum dollar, like the burning of fossil fuel, are going to be replaced by battery cars, which is already taking place. Once they begin to replace the burning of fossil fuel, which is not fossil, which is carbon, which destroys the environment. Not that carbon does, but the output of those internal combustion engines, the exhaust fumes, poison and toxify a human being as well as the earth itself. Those things are coming to an end and will be coming to an end in the next 5 years. That's the plan for it. The world is going to be electrified. Imagine how much petroleum dollar is spent, petroleum money, which is mineral based, just like gold and silver. So please do not think the fiat currency is just as an empty currency. When they replaced it from the gold standard, they replaced it by backing it with another mineral called oil. So do not go into this conspiracy that it is just empty currency. It is not. It has some substance. And that substance is what I'm saying is going to come to an end, called oil. The car manufacturers will be forced just simply to stop using oil. Even the tires on a car are made out of oil. It is a highly toxic part of human beings because we have been becoming habitated to it. It's a habit now. Our habit is about burning carbon fuel, and that's coming to an end by the Titans. And I'll call them Titans, and I'm happy to call them Titans. Titan just simply means a person that is now in control of their contract. Titan means title. Title is a piece of paper, ladies and gentlemen. Once you learn how to forge it, you will understand a lot more than you ever did. So, that petroleum industry is coming to an end, as you know. Now let's go on to the power stations. Each individual household is also being rigged up under the grid system to be able to produce their own power, as well as supply the grid system itself. This is a starfish mechanism. This is a starfish organization as opposed to a spider organization. In this starfish organization, every household is that element of that symbiotic relationship, thereby stopping the burning of the carbons in the power stations and the nuclear power stations, which are now becoming redundant and have become redundant in their hundreds, as it were. Sorry, I withdraw that hundreds. Shall we say in their dozens? The cost of burning these types of fuel are astronomical. And because it's astronomical, the companies now charge you astronomical amounts for gas and electricity because they chose a medium that has exponential liabilities, like the burning of fossil fuel, which should be called, because it's not fossil-based, which should be called carbon burning of carbon, which is highly toxic, albeit the way that they burn it. Why? Because it feeds into that debt-based economy. It makes people ill, and if it makes people ill, then you can sell them another product, and so on and so forth. That's another element that's coming to an end, because each individual household will be their own power station. Let us talk about one other subject that is within this earmark. Take a simple commodity like coffee. Well, the coffee shops are all closed, as you know, and there's minimum amount of coffees being sold. What has that got to do with anything? Well, that's a barometer of the economy. Because when you check how the economy is doing, you check the barometer. How many cell phones are being used? How many cell phones are being sold? How many coffees and lattes are being sold? Gives you an indicator as to what is happening in terms of buoyancy in the market. Well, the coffee is also a highly toxic material. It's an antioxidant. What does an antioxidant do? It stops you from breathing. And that's why you get that choking effect. Take more than 1 cup of coffee a day, you are now toxifying your body. Well, that particular commodity has a lot to answer for, because the people that grow them are also in servitude. It's part of the locking down of general public into servitude. So that element is also being destroyed. The use of cobalt in cell phones, which are mined by children in the African countries, under, shall we say, severe penalties if they don't do so. All this is going to come to an end. And to be able to make sure that the large centralized governments and the corporations don't take full advantage of this economic collapse, the peer-to-peer transaction will enable each one of you to bypass the banking system. Do you see where this promised land is going, ladies and gentlemen? You have the ability to control the mortgages, albeit my court systems do. You don't need to be in debt. You can launch a complaint. But I am letting you know, as a general public, the Great Depression, as you know it, not from the 1930s in the US, but the Great Depression of the carbon-based, the toxic fuel-based, the fiat currency banksters type of economy and doing business, that's being collapsed all around you. And it is the hope of the banksters to be able to pull you down with them, or at least to use your sweat equity to be able to fund their toxic ways. A non-carbon based economy, it's what's being rolled out. That's your cars, your power stations. Your ability to control the mortgages while my court systems, and while you are accessing my court systems, is to learn to use the almighty pen in poetic terms. The power stations, the nuclear power stations, are coming to an end because the Titans have put you in charge of that by making each one of you a unit of power. Child labour is being used extensively throughout the world. And when us, use the products that are produced by children, that's a no-no. That's also coming to an end. So these big fashion shops that sell their trainers and their shoes for hundreds to thousands of pounds per dress or whatever it is, well, they're already gone to the wall. Who needs that type of fashion in a world where you don't need a constant external, how can I put it, verification that you are powerful and that you have beauty, that you have knowledge. They're already gone to the wall. This world that you knew historically, that tries to get you in debt, that's coming to an end, if not coming to an end now. And that process will last about 5 years. In terms of communication, the 5G technologies, you can shut off the sharing of data by just simply writing a letter to these 5G operators saying I do not give you permission to share my data. And if you do, you have to give me this amount of money because it's a commercial transaction. But that 5G technology is there for you to be able to communicate in all four corners of this planet, which is another word for documents. Before I begin to ask questions, before I begin to answer questions, I'm going to make it very clear again. You are now in the depression. The last time the credit agencies took away credit scores and reduced credit card ratings is when the 2008 credit crunch was imminent, and the mass media only reported it a year or so later, when it was too late for the general public to be able to prepare themselves for this depression. I will now take questions.
Hello from South Africa. Can we expect to get a fair government in place for our future, and what we can expect?
So, the question was from South Africa, can they expect a fair government? The answer is absolutely not. How can they give you a fair government? Because you have not dictated your terms and conditions to them. You have to pick up the pen and say what is fair, and this is how it's going to be delivered, and this is when it's going to be delivered. Because I am the end user, and I will determine how the services will be rolled out by your government. Your governments are waiting for you to take up that dictatorial position. So do not ask me, tell your government instead, and they will perform. It's all done with a waiver of a pen. Next question, please.
When are the banks going to pay for the millions of houses they have stolen?
Like always, that type of question is when the banks are going to do this, when the banks are going to do that. That's self-defeating. Come out of that type of thinking. The banks, you are the beneficiary of the banks. Write to them as a beneficiary. Say, hey, you took this house off of me. Using that solicitor, give it back and all the damages. Learn to use the pen. Remember, when somebody puts money into your account, the bank sends you a letter. And on the bottom left-hand corner or the right-hand corner, does it not say that you are the beneficiary? If you are the beneficiary and not the bank, shouldn't you be writing to them as the beneficiary? Now, my court system and what I do is that we have our own language system. But your ability to forge your own pens and your own language does not make you less powerful. It makes you more powerful. Our language system, gifted to us by David Wayne Miller, enables us to control the entire world's language system because it was fraudulently conveyed. Any language that doesn't give you one word per one meaning per sentence, one meaning per word, and one meaning per sentence has violated the basic rules of communication. So once again, do not ask these defeating questions. Ask the questions as you are, that you are the beneficiary and therefore you dictate your terms and conditions. Next question, please.
How do we purchase a home with the pen?
Since you are the beneficiary of who you are, learn to make money. And with that money, buy your homes. Anybody that tells you you need a death pledge to get a home is mistaken. Your government has to provide you with social homes, social housing. The rental market globally is going to turn from the public into the private. That's already started. In other words, every landlord, every person that's renting out a home is essentially dealing with you as a private individual. Isn't that the start? Once again, the questions must not be self-defeating. If the question is self-defeating, you will rob yourself of understanding of what a beneficiary is. This economy, as bad as it's going to get, you can become the beneficiary of it and not the victim of it by educating yourself. Most of the information that you need is on my website or in David Wayne Miller's lectures or on his website. Make use of it. Next question, please, and it would really help if I do not have a self-defeating question. Your questions cannot be that of a victim because you are not victims of the banks. You have to make them the victims. They're the ones that got the death pledges. It is they that have violated banking rules and language rules and money laundering and so on and so forth. Next question, please.
Will gold and silver have value?
Gold and silver has always had value. It has never lost value. In fact, it is gaining value. When I did the gold information, and it's not just me, a lot of other people did it as well. When that was released, gold was floating at round about $1,110 by troy ounce of gold. It is now about to break the $2,000 barrier. In other words, once it breaks the $2,000 barrier, it's in free flow, letting the whole world know you have never moved out of the gold standard and you have never moved out of the silver standard. I will take two more questions and then I will call it an end. Next question, please.
The Jisara Nisara, is it true or another ploy to pacify people?
If you believe that the government is going to give you a handout without you using this, that's called a promissory note. Any forgiveness of debt cannot be done unless you pull this out and learn how to use it. Otherwise, it's just a promissory note. It's just a promise of a politician. It's just a promise. So get into the pattern of thinking, which I've been educating you folks on for a very long time. Learn to pull in that promise. So when the senator makes a promise, pull that promissory note in. That will stop you from being a victim of this economic global crunch. Next question, please, and that will be my final question.
Is crypto going to be a gold-backed digital asset?
In order for any currency to have value, it must have sweat equity. So if the gold is not sweat equity and if the silver is not sweat equity, in other words, people actually labor to pull it out, then it has no value. And gold is sweat equity. So somehow the cryptocurrencies, which are really just called digital currencies, it's a wrong word. It's in passe, it actually means dead things. But in terms of digital currency, someone somewhere would have had to labored in order to get that one digit into their account. So yes, if gold is a standard measure of sweat equity, the digital currency will be exactly that. Now, I'm going to bring this to an end. My next presentation, which will be broadcasted, not live, but as a recording, will be on the COVID-19, what is happening there, and also what corona is happening with the vaccines, and the lies and the deceptions that have been going on for what is commonly known for the fiction people. In other words, those people that are dead on paper. How the governments have been fraudulently conveying their language to get you to believe that the world is somehow dying from this toxic, from this virus. Well, the whole thing, like the World Health Organization, is a fraud. They are a shadow agency using all manner of false language to mislead people. And I will be blowing the whistle on that on my next presentation. Thank you very much for listening to me, folks. Please share this video. You do not need to be a victim of this global depression. Once you've learned to use this pen, which is mightier than a sword, it'll put you in a position of sovereigns. Once again, thank you very much. Bye-bye now.